Facebook Live on the Board of Commissioners website, and they're going to send questions into my producer. She hands me the questions and I give them to you. But before all that starts happening, let's just kind of give them some warm-ups for who you guys are. And I told them on Facebook when I did the Facebook Live, but because we got so many of y'all today.
Pause for a moment.
Okay.
We lost it.
Oh, okay.
So just talk to them and keep them engaged.
Okay. So somewhere the producer told me the feed went down, so they're rebooting it back up. But anyways, we'll just keep talking and they'll just come back on. The point is though that we've had a really good, robust response, getting a couple of 1,000 folks generally joining us every day, and so we're really hello. I think they dropped.
I can hear you.
Oh, wait a minute.
We're here.
Okay.
Yep, I can hear you and see you.
If I can hear you as well.
They're saying, keep going. We're good. Okay. All right. So back to the show. So let's dive right into it. Man, 2020 has been a crazy year. You know, we started off with the global pandemic that by the time it hit the United States, we were just caught off guard, really, even though we could see it coming nationally. And I think maybe perhaps at the federal level, there was a slow response, and then that kind of translated to what happened at the local level. Then our state, you know, acted, I think, fairly swiftly and began to sort of put measures in place to try to prevent the spread and slow things down. And then, you know, we got hit with the tragedy and the death of George Floyd, which I think ignited a long overdue conversation in the American sphere about racism in America. And so we had that. You all over the last few days have been hit with what I think will be the biggest unwinding of government around a scandal that we've seen in a lifetime, in the speaker being with a complaint being filed with Speaker Larry Householder around corruption and racketeering. And so that's kind of taking time. So this, plain and simple, been a hell of a year. But tell me how you feel it. I mean, in a few words, and we got to keep it kind of, ask your answer to be like, you know, a minute or so, but tell me how you feeling about this year. Do you feel optimistic? Do you feel pessimistic? Do you feel encouraged? Do you feel hopeful? I mean, you know, how would you sum up how you feel? Let me start with my own Senator, Senator Craig. How are you feeling about the time we're in right now?
Well, obviously, it's not just how I'm feeling, but there are many people, because of the uncertainty, I think feelings of anxiety because of COVID, certainly, particularly in Franklin County, when we've got 16,000 people, over 16,000 people that have been diagnosed, and then another over 400 people that have died. So there's real feelings of concern regarding COVID, but I think you've already mentioned it as well with regard to the issue of George Floyd. That's another pandemic, and folks really needed to elevate the conversation with regard to race, and we've done that in the State House. But quite frankly, as a person of faith, I'm always going to be hopeful, but not with my head in the sand. These are real issues. And there's deep concern. Just today, 850 people have been let go from L brand. That means those are people's lives and their families. So I am yet hopeful, but I think the things that we certainly have to do.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I hear you. You know, and I think that's what I think everyone's feeling, that L brand's impact, because it's such a staple in Central Ohio. Phil, tell me about how you feeling. You represent a district that, you know, has been Democrat, Republican. Do you feel optimistic about the time, and maybe tell us a little bit about what your district looks like?
Sure. So real quick, thank you again for having me, Commissioner. Glad to be here with this illustrious panel. My district is 18 suburbs in the southeastern part of Caucus County, and it's a mixture of some blue collar neighborhoods, but also some affluent communities as well. And a lot of folks, no matter what your background is, they're feeling the pain. Questions I get from constituents all the time: will my kids be safe in school? I get that every time I go out to the grocery store or go somewhere. Will I have a place to, will I have to work a second job to pay the rent or pay the mortgage? Will my family be able to afford health insurance, especially with COVID-19 and pre-existing conditions? And then also the spike in COVID-19 cases. So similar to Senator Craig in Franklin County, in Cuyahoga County, we're a level 3 as well. So we have a lot of cases that are happening. And we also have a lot of people who are sick. And we're trying to rally around that as well. So there's a lot of uncertainty. The reason why I'm optimistic is even though it is a majority white district, we've seen Black Lives Matter protests all over our district, which is in areas that traditionally you wouldn't see something like that, which has been inspiring to see. And we see people trying to band together, but what they're looking for and what I know the brothers on this panel are part of is some direction and some leadership. And they want to know where we're going. So optimistic, yet willing to face the brutal facts that are in front of us.
Okay, so we got hopeful, we got optimistic. Rep Upchurch, how are you feeling? How's it in your district, and maybe tell us a little bit about your district and how you feeling, what you see.
Sure. Well, first of all, Commissioner, I want to thank you for having me. Always good to see you, brother. You are looking healthy yourself. I hope you're taking care, and I hope your family's well. Just a brief background about my district. So my district is predominantly the northeast side of Cleveland. It is one of the most impoverished districts in the state of Ohio. However, I do have some of the largest economic drivers in the state of Ohio, covering downtown Cleveland, as well as University Circle. And then I have an affluent neighborhood, or an affluent city in my district, which is Brattonall Village, where some of the wealthiest families in northeastern Ohio live. As far as how I'm feeling, you'll appreciate this as a fellow Greek, and I know Senator Craig will appreciate this as a fellow Greek too. My head is bloody, but unbowed. And no matter how bad things seem to get, I still remain optimistic that we can get through whatever lies ahead. This pandemic has been detrimental on two folds. There's a public health component of it, but there's also an economic component of it. And a lot of times we see where there's economic turmoil, the families that we represent, predominantly working class African-American families, tend to be the most vulnerable. So working through that has been the greatest challenge. But I'm optimistic when I look at my colleagues and their drive and their passion. I'm optimistic that we can get through this moving forward, and we still got to stay in the fight. I mean, this is what we signed up for. We didn't sign up for a cakewalk. I mean, it's never going to be, a situation where you can just pass bipartisan bills left and right. No, I mean, it's one roller coaster after the other. But we've all been battle tested on this call. So, I'm going to remain optimistic that we can get through this.
And so we got one hopeful and two optimistics. And this is trending in a very good way. And so I don't know, maybe it'll change up, but Tom West, I mean, you're in Canton, and so what's it like in Canton? What's your district like, and what's the feel in Canton? How do you feel about the environment we're in right now? We got to unmute you here, so let me just unmute you, help you out here. There you go, you got it.
So in a time when, of course, you have a lot of uncertainty, a lot of the community, when it deals with their children, when it comes down to schools, and as you guys know, we are the birthplace of football. So obviously football is a major thing right now with the Pro Football Hall of Fame canceling this year. This was the 100th year of football. And obviously the cancellation of that is going to make a major impact economically on our district and our cities and our county, if you will. But I tell you what, through it all and through all of the dysfunction that we see going on with respect to COVID-19 and no one knowing the uncertainty, but through that, I believe that there's opportunity for change. So when you start to see, we're all feeling uncomfortable about where we're at today, but through that uncomfortableness, we can find opportunity to actually move everyone in a positive direction. I always say that, we're only as strong as our weakest link. So this is the time for us to start looking at all those people and making certain that all boat rises as we all rise together.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. So I think I hear you saying positive. I mean, I heard that's what the word I got. You feel positive about where, so we got a hopeful, two optimistics, and a positive. And I think the cake that we're building here is a positive one. It looks like so. Representative Denson, I mean, Cincinnati has definitely had its history with bouts of unrest and challenge, and so you're knee deep in it, and in that region of the state tends to be a region that can be conservative, historically has been conservative. So how are you feeling? What are you seeing, and what's the like in Cincinnati? What's it like in Cincinnati? What's the climate?
I think the climate here in Cincinnati, and certainly Senator Thomas could probably weigh in as well, is that when we take the pandemic, obviously that's something that we aren't used to. But when you take the George Floyd, we've been here before dealing with situations like this. We've dealt with a lot of situations like this. We've had riots in 2001 with civil unrest. And so the way that I'm feeling is I feel real, I would say nervous. And nervous because I think this time we've got to figure out that it's going to take us to come together to get this right. And so with that opportunity, we can't wait for, and I hope I can say this on your show, white people to fix our problems. Mm-hmm. This is sorry about that.
No, come on, hey, little man.
Hi.
We have to figure out how to come together. And I know that Cincinnati is not unique to having those issues where we as a community have struggled to work together. And so this time we have got to be smart about working together and figuring out what our agenda is and what we want to get out of this. If we don't do that, this moment in time will pass and we'll yet be sitting in a climate where we have white people trying to tell us how to fix our problems again. So within this opportunity, I'm just nervous. And I hope that for once that we come together as a community and we present what we need and we get to working on it right away.
And your brothers are bringing it today, man. I think you're spot on. It'll be interesting to see what kind of feedback we get with questions. But I think you're spot on. Senator Thomas, my man, I'm so glad to have you. I think Fred Strayhorn is trying to get in. They're telling me to let him in. Let me see. He's not showing up on here, but have him try to call back in. But my man, Senator Cecil Thomas, as Representative Denson said, he represents the Cincinnati region area. So tell us a little bit about the district, but B, I see you out there getting your workout on too. It looks like you working out while you tuning in. So that's a man that can juggle. And by the way, for those who are watching, listening, Senator Thomas is a former law enforcement officer. And so his perspective is very unique and very timely to be in the legislature, as all of these issues have really taken a lot of our attention over the last few months. So Senator Thomas, how are you feeling about the climate now? You've seen a lot too, particularly in law enforcement, but how are you feeling about the climate? You got to unmute your mic, Senator. Let me unmute it for you. Oh, there you go. You got it. You might want to put your phone up to your mouth because we can't hear you. Yeah, we almost, there you go. Yeah, it's not quite working. We'll take a break from seeing your face. Just put it up to your mouth and talk, and then we'll just go back.
All right. Is that better?
That's much better. That's much better.
Okay, there's a saying that power concedes nothing without a struggle. Well, Black folks been struggling for power in Hamilton County as long as I've lived in Hamilton County, and that's 40, 50 years. The situation, obviously, my representative Denson is right on spot on it. I would even go further than to say nervous. I'd say we got to fight for what we're going to have to fight for and take it. It's just that simple. When this pandemic hit, we were already in a pandemic when it comes to the quality of life of African Americans in the city of Cincinnati. Now we're in a much worse state. So it's going to take the support of what we're seeing around the country. We got to take advantage of it. This is a 1960s moment when Dr. King marched and had all of those white folks marching with him. Well, this is where we are now in Cincinnati, in Hamilton County. We are going to have to demand change, talking about contracts when it comes to small businesses and all of that stuff. bottom line is I agree with my cohort, Cedric Denson, concerned, and if we don't take advantage of this moment, we're going to find ourselves set back 400 years.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And, you know, I think we'll just open this up now. So the questions going forward, unless I get them online, I'm gonna just open up and let you all chime in, whoever wants to answer the question, and we'll try to get through to allow everybody a chance to say something. But I think it was Representative Denson that brought up the idea that I'm gonna mute you for the time being, Senator, but when you're ready to talk, just let me know and I'll let you back in there. But we're in a time where, you know, this unrest is in this identity around what happened with George Floyd has really created an environment where everyone, America is reconciling itself, you know, from 400 years of oppression on Black people in America. A portion of America is saying, let's change. And I don't know about you, but for me, I've had a number of white people call me, come up to me, write me, and they say, what can I do to help the cause and the movement? So what do you say when they ask you that? I know that they've come up and I know they've asked you that. Perhaps it's some of your colleagues, perhaps it's some folks in your district, but what do you say when, and has someone said that to you? You know, what do you say when white people say that to you? Representative Denson?
Yeah, kind of going back to my point, I stick strong to this whole notion that we've got to figure out as a community how we work together and understand what our agenda really is. So when I say that, I kind of put them on hold and say, hold on a minute. And then what I say to our community is, we can't expect them to do something when we don't know what we want. And so we've got to be clear as a community about what we want, because as we know, oftentimes we start putting out what seems to be priorities from whatever groups that we're in or whatever circles that we run. But is this the collective whole of what the Black community is asking for? Is this the direction that we really want to go? And so when you have all those tentacles of everybody having all of that being put out at one time, then it becomes for us, well, no, we want to go this way or we want to go that way. So until we understand what we want, I don't think we can clearly communicate to those allies what they can do. Because in that regard, we want to make sure we're getting out of them the most that we can get out of them for what an ally is going to mean in this space.
Man, spot on. I couldn't agree more. Anybody else? What do you say when white people say to you, what can I do? Representative Upchurch, what you got?
Yeah, thank you. And Rep. Denson is absolutely right. We have to define what it is we want and what we want to come out of this. And I would also say that sometimes it helps to get our allies to understand, because they may want to be allies, but they may not actually understand. Right after the whole George Floyd incident, one of my colleagues on the other side sent me a message, and the message said, I'm sorry about what's happening to you. I never quite understood racism. So that right there tells you that there is sympathy there, and there's a want to help, but they just lack the understanding. I mean, we're on this call right now, and there's 7 Black men on this phone, on this call, and each and every one of you can say at some point, either your mother, your father, or one of your grandparents sat you down and had a conversation with you about being a Black man in America and about an encounter with law enforcement. Each and every one of us can say that. My grandfather sat me down, had that conversation with me. My mother did, my father did, uncles, older cousins. At some point you had that conversation. Commissioner, I know you had that with your children.
Absolutely.
Rep. West, Senator Craig, Rep. Robinson, Rep. Denson, I know you're gonna have that with Harper at some point. And a lot of people don't understand that. They don't have to have those conversations with their children. It's a reality that they need to understand. And, you know, part of what we want, I think, to piggyback off what Rep. Denson said, is to help them understand this is real. And every time we get pulled over by a law enforcement or a cop, there is a potential risk there. Even as an elected official, you know what I mean? It's not like they really care. So I just think helping them get the understanding is paramount if we're going to get anything out of this.
Man, I couldn't agree more. You know, I feel like when I'm asked a question, I always feel awkward, because I kind of feel like, well, where you want me to start? You know, I mean, you know, I can spend all day telling you what you can do. And
How much time?
Right. Yeah. How much time you got, but I think at the heart of it is that, you can't legislate morality, where real racism, real change in racism is gonna start is with individuals and people in their own homes, in their own neighborhoods, in their churches, at their workplace, really beginning to, and public policy will help and it will drive a lot of the bigger change. But at the end of the day, it's just people. So I like what you were saying.
And
you had something else?
yeah, one more thing, bro, because I don't want to soak up all the time. And one thing my grandfather always told me was racism is an emotion. You can have African American neighbors, work with African Americans, and claim you're not racist, but it's how you feel deep down inside. Mm-hmm. It's how you felt the first time you saw Barack Obama walk into the White House, or how you feel when you see me unloading my furniture off a moving truck moving next door to you. It's an emotion. And people have to change within it in order for us to move forward, without a doubt.
Well said. Rep Robinson, you had something?
Just two quick things. I appreciate everyone's comments they shared so far. Two things I tell people the most times I hear that question are: one, if you see something, to call out or name it, and don't look for an African American to call it out first. So if you see signs of racism or you see discrimination, to be the person in the room to say something versus waiting for a person of color to do that. And then the second thing is to make sure if you're in a room or you're part of an organization that isn't diversified or doesn't have people at the table to help make decisions, to do something about that immediately, to call that out and to make a change as fast as possible. Those are two things any ally can do, and they don't necessarily need to wait for a person of color to do something about it.
That's right. That's right. Anybody else want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I also agree with that. I think one of the things that I've had numerous people come up to me, even as I was sitting on the bench in my backyard here, a woman came up to me and said, I don't know what to say, but I don't like what's going on. And I said, well, then you just said enough. You don't like what's going on. And the reality is a lot of people don't know what to say or don't know what to do and don't even know the feelings. They don't understand institutional racism. That's why, I applaud Franklin County for, again, bringing forward this whole issue of the declaration of the resolution of racism. I know Senator Craig right now got House Concurrent Resolution 31 on the books to declare racism as a public health crisis, following the lead of the commissioners. I'm very proud of that, because now that has opened up the door for a lot of people to see what's going on. When we talk about our health, when we talk about our wealth, when we talk about all the things that's going on in the Black community, people need to be exposed to that. When we talked about the environment today, it's really about exposing all the things that were brushed under the carpet. Yeah. And it's time for that to be lifted up and for all of us to get involved. When it comes down to your leadership isn't just the African Americans that are on this call or this telecall. No, it's 99 legislators that represent all Ohioans, and Black people are a part of that. And so therefore, we need all of that leadership to come forward and address the social ills that plague African Americans each and every day. Yes, we as an individual need to understand what we want out of this, but the reality is, I think everyone knows, we want people to have good paying jobs. We want to make certain that our health, when we go to get health care, that we're not looked upon as a secondary citizen, if you will. We want all the things that every other American wants. And I think that's where leadership comes in, and I'll shut up on that.
Okay. Now the senators have the mic, so it's Senator Craig, and then you're up next, Senator Thomas. We got to unmute you, Senator Craig. There you go.
Thank you. I certainly want to thank Representative Stinson. I raised some issues. Number one, with us working together around a common goals and common issues, it's clear to me that ought to be one of the first things that we all need to do as African Americans, begin to have central thoughts and to be working around common goals and common interests. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm sorry. The producer was saying something. I'm listening. Go ahead.
The other thing to me, and no, you cannot legislate morality. But here's the thing with Dr. King. Number one, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Fair Housing Act of 1968 could not legislate morality, but all of those things helped to move our nation forward, and certainly in terms of African Americans. The reality with President Obama, folk were saying, well, this is a pro-racial environment. This was clear. I think the issue with George Floyd and Eric Garner and others, and even in our own personal lives, have demonstrated it's not a pro-racial environment. And so now we're at a moment in time in terms of what we're really going to do, the tangential kinds of things that we need to talk about, economic development in the African American community, making sure no matter what our children's zip code is that they have quality education. In terms of affordable health care. And those are the kind of things that I've looked at moving in the legislature, practical, systemic kinds of things, because it is structural and racism that we can get done. And it's extremely serious in this moment in time.
Yeah, outstanding. Senator Thomas, bring us home on this question. Senator Thomas. He may have stepped away. Senator Thomas, if you are trying to talk, you're on mute, so you got to unmute your phone there. There you go.
All right, there we go. Yeah, I came in the legislature back in 2015, and the numbers are just not adding up. There's 33 senators, only 9 at this time are Democrat. In fact, we lost one. We're going backwards. The point of the matter of that is that not only in the Senate, but in the House, we do not have the numbers, and we cannot rely on the goodwill of our friends on the other side, because the goodwill of the friends on the other side are influenced by all these other more, I guess, important entities that influence them. The NRA, for example, and all the money that they give, and some of the other more far right-wing kinds of organizations. I say that to say that we're at a crossroads, not only in Ohio, but around the country. We have to decide, how are we going to maneuver during this effort of high interest in Black Lives Matter, which encompasses a whole lot of other stuff. How do we maneuver through our legislature to our advantage under these difficult times? We're not going to get it if we're going to rely on the current makeup of the House and the Senate to try to move forward a lot of these common sense kinds of pieces of legislation that make practical sense. We're not going to get it done relying on what we have in the Senate or in the House. But what we have to do is utilize this time to get people out to vote, to get people moving in the direction of voting more reasonable thinking people into the Senate and the House, to give us some numbers that will allow us to do some of the things that we've been trying to do. Ohio, extremely conservative state. Hamilton County, very conservative. Point of the matter is the power of the vote. And since we have so many people who are now interested in how government operates and how government functions, and they want a more diverse society, and they want to be represented at their state and local levels as well as their federal levels, simply because we see so often Ohio has been a one-party state, one voice coming out of Ohio in terms of things that they want done. And that's been our problem. How do we straighten that out and deal from that standpoint?
I think everything you all said just really is spot on. I know when I think that the one thing I'll add is that I think that many of the difference for me is that many of the white people that asked me that today, I feel like there is a level of sincerity to it, you know, that everybody is, not everybody, but a lot of people are exhausted and tired and frustrated and upset and just ready to move to a different place in history in America. And I do feel like there's a level of sincerity that they come in when they say, hey, what can I do? And so I'm just trying to think of the right things to tell them so that they can get involved in a way that is meaningful. We got our first question in online, and this is from Meredith Lawson Rowe, it looks like. Hope I got that right, Meredith. Thanks for joining us today. But she asked the question, and it really dovetails from what Senator Thomas was just talking about. She says to all of you, what can we do at the local and municipal level to support what you're doing at the state legislature? And I think this is also critical because I find, and I served in the legislature with some of you, I find that often there's a disconnect between the work that we do in the legislature and what's happening at the community level. Sometimes it's on us as elected officials and our ability to share information or communicate well. And sometimes it's on the public to be not as engaged in things that don't seem as important to their daily lives, but it really is. But she's asking, Mary, this is a legitimate question. What can they do at the local level to support what you all do at the state legislature?
Can I try to hone in
Please,
on that?
Senator.
Thank you, Meredith, for that question. Number one, we in Senate Bill SCR 14, racism declared as a public health crisis. We had over 20 hours of testimony. So on that kind of legislation that really affects the bottom line of local government in a significant way, it's either, and again, I think we need to be able to reach out to you in a substantive way and let you know what's going on. The other part of that is that people came from around the state to comment on that legislation because of its implication for our children and our families. So, writing your legislators or calling your legislators, nothing more important, it's already been said, than voting. Nothing is absolutely. But I think even with the protest, and I went to many and joined many protesting, those that were protesting, but I know we've got to follow that all the way through so that we're able to move the needle when it comes to the lives of African-American children and other people of color and everyone in terms of operationally and systemically what needs to happen. So the part to play, the accountability is on both sides. Obviously, with elected officials, we have enormous accountability because we're not there for our own self-aggrandizement. But at the same time, for the community to certainly get involved in the process, help us as we're moving and trying to serve you. So writing, sending letters, sending emails, and legislators do respond to that. So strongly encourage that. And also for the elected officials to be working together. The local elected officials from city council to the county commissioners to the legislature we all need to be working together in a common goal around.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head, and we're doing better at that, but that's something we got to strive to do. And that's to make sure that we're communicating in a way that will allow that information to transfer. One thing I'll say before we take the next response is that, people ask me all the time about the declaring racism as a public health crisis. And they say, well, what does that do? And what does it mean? And I said, well, it does a number of things. The first thing is it's a value proposition. It says that for us at Franklin County, everything we do is going to be rooted in the idea that we want equality, we want access, we want inclusion, and all of the things that allow everybody to have access to the opportunity. And so that value proposition is critical and important. And then when you connect it to actions and real items that make a difference, that's when you start to move the needle. Who can take that question next? What can we do? And this is from Meredith Lawson Rowe. What can we do at the municipal level to support what you do at the state legislature?
So
I think Representative West want to come.
Yeah, so as a city councilman, obviously I was on a local level serving individuals and families. And oftentimes when you see at the city level, something going on at state level, you could also come in and speak about that at your city government and then employ them to give resolutions to the state supporting or rejecting. The number one thing is to be heard. we need to hear your voice by calling our office, by sending us a letter. You know, one of the things as a city councilman, anytime you had a number of people that would come down and sit at our meetings, we would wonder, why are there so many people? Right? And we would take notice of that. And people would get up and speak about the issues that are, so if something's going on at the state level, that's not being touching down at your city level, go to your city level and start talking to them about that and say, how can we connect to the state to get this issue addressed for our needs? So I think that that's one way to do it. Thank you for your question, Mayor.
Yeah, that was a good question, a good answer. We got State Representative Fred Strayhorn from the Dayton area who joined us. I said to everybody before you got here, Fred, there's always one that their technology just ain't quite, working. And Senator Thomas was kind of he was on the throne for that one guy for the day. But now you just won the award of somebody that having technical difficulties. But welcome to the show. Thanks for taking time
I'm
out
one
of
of
your.
the older members, so that's got something.
That's true. That's true. That's true. You are one of the older members. There's no doubt. Nobody's gonna argue that. Nobody's gonna argue that. But let me give you an opportunity to answer this question. Meredith Lawson Rowe wrote in online and asked us the question: what can we do at the local level to support what you do in the legislature?
Yeah, two things jump at me, Meredith. Thanks for the question. One is showing up, and the other one is numbers. A lot of cities, whether they're suburban or urban or rural, a lot of cities have similar issues based on policy problems, either created by the state or ignored by the state. And so when they combine that voice, the number is greater, and the greater the number, the more of attention it gets. And there's a group of cities, I think it's about 26 cities. Some have Democratic mayors, some have Republican mayors, but they've combined that voice to talk as one, to say, hey, we all agree that these are issues that need to be addressed. Again, either something that was created by the state or ignored by the state. The second thing I'd say, showing up, and I think Senator Craig kind of talked about this, as well as Representative West, is my first go around in the legislature, I saw more frequently large groups of people who had a common interest show up on the lawn of the State House in a peaceful way and say, hey, we want to be heard and we want you to see us. We want you to see us en masse. I felt like my second go around, I didn't see that as much. And I think people are maybe a little bit disenfranchised about whether it matters or not. It does matter. It mattered back then. It made a difference. It's their house. As Senator Craig said, it's not about us, it's about them. You only elect us because you can't put 11 million people in the house to do that work, but we work for them. But they still got to show up so that folks that are in charge and decision makers really believe somebody's paying attention and care. And I'd like to see more of that. And I think at the municipal level, they can help organize that effort and then show up on the lawn of the State House or come into the State House, which is harder than it used to be when I started. Because they used to have open access, and I think they should still have open access. That's their house. But at least show up on the lawn and say, hey, this is what we want. This is what we're talking about, and remind everybody that we work for them, not the other way around.
Man, well said. Love that part too. Let me give a quick shout out to Keena Smith, our deputy administrator, who's joined watching online. Thank you for tuning in. Tracy Robinson and Willie Gibson, thank you so much for giving us a minute as your audience, as an audience today. But you hit the nail on the head. You spurred another question that I'll sort of throw part B into the rest of the group to answer that question, and that's the protests. Some people will say that we're listening now as elected officials because they stormed the State House and they put red paint on the stairs and they had to, force their way to get our attention. Is that the right way? Even though you said you in your answer, and I'm putting this to the rest of the group so we can get everybody to answer this. But Representative Strayhorn brought up an interesting concept: showing up. But now the folks who are yelling Black Lives Matters are saying we are showing up and we finally got y'all to listen, but it took us to break some windows and to kick down some doors and to paint some walls in order to get your attention. What do you say to that? And then connect that to Meredith's question. Who wants to go? Representative Denson?
Yeah, I think that going to the protest is that it brings an interesting viewpoint to this. I've often said that a lot of times, at least for Cincinnati, the organizers of the protests aren't the typical folks that you've seen get involved in leading things like this. It's just been, in some cases for us, some young people who got up and were feeling what was going on and said, let's meet downtown and let's march and let's rally. And that's good, but they don't have the history of what organizing really means to a movement. So therefore, showing up and knowing where to put that energy is sort of lost in translation. So I had said, as a part of what we were doing here with our lunch with legislators from our Hamilton County delegation, let's get all of those folks that organize those protests that typically aren't involved and don't have that history, and let this resolution be the next step. Because here's what typically happens: after they get out, they march, they rally, and they do all those things, they feel as though, well, nothing happened. So I think as legislators, when we see things like that happening, we have to be smart enough to connect those two and say, no, here is the next step, and here is how you get involved to let your voice be heard. And I get the pushback about the resolution from even some folks here in Hamilton County saying, well, why a resolution? It's merely just words on paper. And I say, well, yeah, that's true, but we've always been able to legislate, and where has that got us? Obviously nowhere. We put legislation out time and time again, and we've gotten nothing out of it. So perhaps in this time, in this environment where we're hearing some white people say, how can I help and be helpful? Even some of those being legislators saying that to us, our colleagues, I think that this is the opportunity where public comment means the most. So when you spend those 20 hours or however long the hours of public comment was, when you put that legislator who has always turned down legislation that we knew needed to happen, but now that he or her is sitting in that room for hour after hour, listening to story after story, situation after situation, perhaps they'll come out with a different understanding and think a little bit differently next time a piece of legislation hits their desk, because they're forced to deal with it in a real way. So the way you weigh in is you show up and you make your voice heard. And at some point we got to get something different out of it, but we can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So that would be how
Yeah, you know.
Well said. Who's that?
It's Senator Thomas.
Okay.
You know, history has shown us is that you got to get folks' attention. It's just that simple. You know, the Voting Rights Act of the 60s, 1960s, didn't just pop up and everybody said, okay, let's sit down and talk and we'll work it all out. It didn't happen that way. It took for the protesters to be brutalized, if you will, by the opposition, to the point where it raised the conscience of the nation. And not only the nation, but the world. When they saw the fire hoses and the dogs and the billy clubs, all of that stuff, people of goodwill came from all walks of life and said, no more, we're not going to stand this. This is not America. And as a result, we got the Voting Rights Act. This is where we're at now. We're at another one of those raising the conscience of the nation and the world moments. When that young man died with that officer's knee on his neck, that was it. And all the people of goodwill have said, we want to help. What can we do? One thing they've agreed to do is get out there and protest. Now, some of them may paint something on a wall, do a little damage here and there. And I'm not advocating setting fires and stuff like that. No. Peaceful protest makes a huge difference. And when you see what's going on in Portland, where people are taking a stand against a government, a Trump government, which wants to be a dictator and all this other craziness that he's doing, they're taking a stand against that, because there are people out there who want to keep their knee on the necks of African Americans and people of color. And if we take the opportunity to say, well, okay, well, let's sit down and talk it through. We'll let everything go quiet and we'll talk it out. It's not going to get you anywhere. You have to keep the pressure on. Yeah. And I'm for one to keeping that pressure on.
Absolutely. Who wants to take that? I think Rep. Robinson, you want to say?
Sure, thank you, Commissioner. Just building off the things that I shared, three things that come to my mind. One is holding your elected officials both locally and at the state level accountable. Making sure that they're coming out and sharing what's happening, make sure they're doing town hall meetings, making sure they're making themselves available. I know everyone on this screen is doing town hall meetings and now virtual Zoom meetings, but unfortunately, sometimes on the other side, that's not happening. Two is around the impact of gerrymandering and the power of local elections. So in our district, for the first time, we have 2 African Americans in 2 different communities, Walton Hills and Solon, who are our city council folks. And so, as we know, we've all seen the data over the last decade or 12 years, how we've lost a lot of state house seats. And well, the bench there comes from your local government, whether it's mayors, city council members, and things of that nature. So when you see folks voting 59-49 in elections in Ohio, but you see the gerrymandering at the state level, it demonstrates that we need to make some change there as well. And then the final thing about protesting versus government, it's not mutually exclusive. It's not an either or, it's an and. You need both in order to do it, and it's a powerful 1-2 punch. So you saw the protests that happened, and then we think about what you've done at the county level, Franklin County, with public health as a racism as a public health crisis, and then what Senator Craig and his colleagues are doing in the Senate. It shows that you can work together. It's not a choice. And in fact, you want to have that pressure on the outside and then have that pressure on the inside. And I remember the story of reading about it where Teddy Roosevelt told Asa Philip Randolph, I need you to make that noise on the outside because that's what gets me to do what I do on the inside. And so you need to be able to do it together. It's not a choice. And in working together, you can get a lot more done that way than any type of manufactured division. You need both in order to make change happen.
Man, Rip Robinson, you reminded me of something today. Earlier, I screened before the Baptist Ministerial Alliance, and they asked me a question about some of the progress that we were making in Franklin County and how we were able to make some of this progress, whether it's in procurement for minorities or hiring or whatever. And my response to them was, it was because of them. Because they kept the pressure from the outside and we're trying to do the work on the inside. And so it's easier to accomplish it when you've got sort of both working together. And so to Meredith's question, I think it's spot on that engagement and participation. And I'm one to think that, with regards to the things that happened in protest, I mean, keep in mind, it was a protest that really led to the formation of the United States of America in the form of the Boston Tea Party. And, and then unfortunately it turned violent and it turned, chaotic and all of those things. But the result was a better nation. And while even our founding fathers from that point didn't get it quite all right, they created a system that was designed to change, grow, and evolve. And that's really the principle of democracy that's so great. Anybody else want to take on this question before we move on? Let me give a quick shout out to Kevin Lloyd from Columbus Black, who's also broadcasting and watching this. Thanks, Kev, for joining me today. And then my cousin, Connie Hanna, is joining me from Zanesville. Thank you so much, cuz. Good to see you. And call me sometime, see how I'm doing, I could be COVID-19, you wouldn't know, but you're going to call on the show and everything anyway. So anyways, good to see you, cuz.
Can I say something about it? So the beginning of this question was about attacking the State House and getting our attention. I want to remind everybody that was a response to something happened at that moment. It wasn't a planned out attack or vandalism on the State House. It was a response to something people felt provoked by the police. So that was spontaneous. That was in the moment. I'm not real big on property damage because I think that gets you a mixed message, gets you a mixed bag of response. Some people fear that as anarchy and those kinds of things. Peaceful protest and keeping that pressure on, like Senator Thomas said, I think is important. But I want to proffer a little bit different view in that it's different than the 60s, right? It is that Black people in America spend more money than the 7th largest nation in the world. So there is another way to keep the pressure on. We don't direct that money. We don't focus that money. We don't pay attention to what we do with that money collectively. And sometimes our own Black institutions spend really big chunks of money with majority community companies that they could have spent with African-American companies. And so I would offer that, yes, physical presence pressure is still important and should happen. I think we need to do a better job with our financial ability to put pressure on companies and institutions to do the right thing by minority folks. And
I'm glad you brought up that the economic. Representative Upchurch had something he wanted to ask, so let me give him the mic. And then I do have a question from online, and this person is coming at y'all, so y'all better get ready. But Rep Upchurch.
Yeah, I just want to touch on the protests. I think that protests are healthy. Each and every one of us are sitting here because of nonviolent protests, which took place during the civil rights era. They were trying to wake up their government, they were trying to wake up the country, and they were trying to change the hearts and minds of people who didn't see things the way that they should be. And I think it's our job as legislators to make sure that we're here with the people that we're sent here to serve. So I think the protests are healthy, and I think a lot can come out of the protests if the follow-up is done correctly.
Man, that's spot on. So I got one question from Alon. I want to get to this young lady's question, and then we got to get on to the census, because it's such a critical part of this year that's getting overlooked by all of this other stuff. But that's something that's core to our long-term strength. But I think I'm saying this name right. Leviana Campbell sent in a question. Thanks for joining in today. And I don't need everybody to answer, because we want to make sure we get around, and who doesn't answer it, we'll launch the next question on the census to them. It's 3:55, so we technically have 5 minutes, but I'm gonna go a little bit longer because we have such a large group and such an engagement coming in online. So if you can't stay, I understand. You can just go ahead and get off, say bye and get off. But if you can, we'll continue the conversation for a few more minutes, even beyond 4. So Leviana Campbell says, she says, let's get something done. We need to stop talking and do something to move forward. What do you say to the people who say we all just talking? So she's saying, like, people saying, they just a bunch of talking heads. What do you say when people say that? Terrence, up church?
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and kick it off, because I do have to get off at 4. I mean, I would say she's absolutely right. But, us getting something done is a collective effort. Get out, get folks registered to vote, so that we can get more seats down here, so that we can create the changes that we desire. Because it's obvious that we are fighting for our best interests in our communities. We can't say that about the other side. So we need to get more people, more like-minded people like ourselves, into the legislature. And that's where the census becomes vital. And I hate to change subjects, but that's where
please do. Yep.
If folks don't do their part of getting something done, which is filling out those census applications, getting them turned in, we're not going to get fair districts again, and we're going to find ourselves in another 10-year lock like we are now.
Man,
so that's just some component of getting stuff done, but it's a collective effort between the people and their government working together.
So I like the way you put those two questions together, and I'm gonna just kind of lay that to the rest of the group and the floor. We want to answer Ms. Campbell's question, but at the same time, the census is huge. You only get a chance to do it every 10 years. We're at that 10 years, and I'm telling you, with COVID-19, unrest nationally, and so many other issues, the census has kind of taken a back seat. Talk about how important that is. When Ms. Campbell says y'all just talking, what do you say when people say that? But here's this census. Here's a real action item that everybody can do. And so maybe talk about your district, how important it is, and the value proposition that the census represents for possibilities for the people you serve.
I was going to jump on the last question as well, and I'll do what you just said. I think one of the things that a lot of people say, you're just talking as legislators, but I would challenge every person that's on this call to go to the website of the Ohio House or the Ohio Senate and see what work has actually been done. One of the things I loved about the protest is the protest came out, and the next thing you know, we started talking about defunding the police. That got everyone's attention. Then you started seeing a series of bills dropping left and right about changing the way we do police reform in the state of Ohio. That started because of people marching and saying, what have you done for me lately? But I challenge you now to go to the House and see what they've done for you lately. Look at all the bills that have dropped in police reform. Look at all the bills that have dropped to help you during the COVID-19. There's a lot going on. Now, the question comes is, what can you at the local level help to do to push the legislation that's been dropped so that it gets across the finish line? So many great bills that are—
Or that it doesn't get across the finish line.
or it doesn't.
Might be the opposite side.
Like Stand Your Ground or things of that nature. You see people fighting against those, laws that could hurt us. We need the support behind that to get that. And as far as the census is concerned, you have a lot of people that right now, they're struggling. They're focused on getting their next meal. They're worried about getting their unemployment check. And they're not even thinking about filling out some census or even where do I go to sign it up or sign up on the computer. I say that to say this. It's really on all of us to reach around our block and check everybody in our neighborhood to see if they filled out their census. And if not, then help them or help march them through that process. And there's a lot of seniors that aren't computer savvy, and they're terrified of actually having to fill out something on a computer. Let's help them. And I think that's on each and every one of us.
Yeah, let me give a quick shout out to State Representative Erica Crawley. She's spying on y'all. She's like any good. She taking y'all legislative ideas. She record this. I'm telling you, Erica's on it. Good to see you, my friend. Thanks for joining in. Who wants to take a stab at that question? I think Senator Craig was trying to say something.
Let me try to say something, and I appreciate what the representative has said. The question is a compelling one. What are you doing? And I would suggest, as he had suggested, because I would not be on this call just to talk. Too many people are hurting. I live in the central city. I don't play any games, but it's real. For those that are serving, what you can do is look at our record. Don't ask. You can look at our record. For me, it's from city council all the way to the Senate. I've got 7 or 8 bills that I've sponsored that we can make sure that you understand what they are. From metastatic cancer that affects all people, stage 4 cancer was voted out of the Senate unanimously, to increasing the minimum wage, to prohibiting evictions and foreclosures, to reducing tax on homestead if increased to not more than 3%, to my most recent bill, Senate Bill 343, expunges evictions after 7 years. Because if you get an eviction on your record, it stays for a lifetime. That's completely unreasonable to me. And so when you ask that question, and I agree with what Representative Stinson said, it is a collective. We all have to be in this together. But do ask the question and check on what folks have done or is doing to do what you've called us to do. The other thing I would suggest very quickly is to, while these folks are on the line, look at the other folks on the other side and what they're doing.
Now you talking.
Ask that question as to what they're doing. They're not on the line. Ask what they're doing. But in terms of the Senate, because I live in the Senate.
And by the way, I ain't having them on either. So just so you know, let me just be clear. I ain't having them on the other side.
And it shouldn't, but I'm just suggesting to you, the question is asked, what are we doing?
Right.
And my simple question is, on the other side, some folk don't even care how that question is answered. But in terms of the Senate, because it affects the everyday lives of people, how their health care, or that census will have significant impact on the quality of life for African Americans in many of our communities. So it's extremely serious.
Well, and this is Senator Thomas. My colleague, Senator Craig, is spot on. We've introduced significant numbers of common sense pieces of legislation that address the quality of life, but it doesn't go anywhere simply because of the numbers in the Senate as well as the House. We can't get things done that are really going to have a very direct impact on quality of life of us as a people. And the problem is simple. Is as simple as the fact that getting something done, what it means is we got to have people, we got to have numbers, we got to have support. I'm sick and tired of introducing common sense legislation, and then it gets one hearing and then that's it, no more. And it's simply because they don't want to pass common sense legislation, regardless of what it is. We're in a one-party system in the state of Ohio, folks. Republicans, and I'm being frank, they don't give a crap about the quality of life of people of African American descent and people of color. That's all about power. They're not going to concede that power. Giving African Americans contracts with the state, significant contracts, They're not going to do that. The only way that's going to happen is we got to vote. We got to get people in office that can support what we've been trying to do up there all the time we've been there. And so I'm very radical.
Man. Yeah, you know, I love it. I love it. You know, say it like it is. And, you know, I'm sure I'll get some emails or some Instagram notes. I always do after these shows, you know, but I invite them. And I want to open it up to the rest of the panel. Our time is getting limited, so we're going to take about maybe another 10 more minutes if you can. If you can, I totally understand. I know Representative Upchurch had to go for another commitment, but let me just put it in context for the rest. And I think Rep. Strayhorn wanted to say something next, but you know, $34 billion comes to Ohio based on our census count. And we know that it's based on population, but the part that people or don't consider all the time is that it also impacts the number of people who represent us in Congress and to fight for that $34 billion. And I can tell you right now, Ohio is in a dead fight with Georgia and North Carolina for population count, and either we'll lose a seat or keep our seats, because states like Texas and Florida and California, they're always going to pick up, they're always going to gain 3 and 4 seats, you know, from population standpoint. And so we are in a fight for our lives. And so being counted is critical stuff. It's real stuff. And that $34 billion comes out to about $1,200 per person every year. And so we've got to make sure that people are doing doing their part in public service. It takes not even 5 minutes to do that little census survey. So Representative Strayhorn, what do you think? And then I might want to make sure I'm being mindful of Meredith's question. We didn't forget about you, or I'm sorry, Ms. Campbell's question. And then I want to give a quick shout out to B. Avery for joining us and Jonathan Bentley for watching us. Thanks so much.
Well, yeah, I want to bring it back to the original, because I think the original question has a distinction to it. What have you done versus what have you done that significantly impacts me personally, my life, that I can see it, feel it, and that it leads to change. So again, playing off of what Senator Craig said, look at what has happened, right? And so I have personally worked with some people on this call to preserve Medicaid amounts, working on transportation funding, and it may not significantly go up, but we're keeping it and fighting from it going down, and that has a significant impact on people's lives. The money that we fight for public education, or when we resist the expansion of charter schools that undermine traditional public education, it's not transformational because it's not getting better, but we do an awful lot of work to prevent it from getting worse and making some marginal situations better. That's not something that people feel on a regular basis, but a lot of that is attached to the census, right? Transportation dollars, Medicaid dollars, education dollars are impacted by the census. And so if we're undercounted, we get less federal dollars to be able to have the resources to manage that stuff. And so there's a play in what we've done that people can't see it, taste it, feel it in dramatic ways, but it does keep people in a situation where things aren't getting worse and they're actually using or experiencing that money. But I want to go back to something I said, and kind of ties into what Terrence said before he left. It can't just be us, right? This is a partnership. We have to have, as Black people, ownership of our own salvation. And yes, there is a role for government to play, but it's not actually bigger than our own role. We have to have a Black agenda. We have to know what we're going for. We have to know what we want to accomplish and how we're going to lay that out and get there, so we know what we're asking for. I've been in rooms where we were fighting and arguing with white people, and when they finally caved in, we didn't actually know what we wanted. And so we've got to be better at saying, this is exactly what we want. And I swore I'd never do that again. We got to know exactly what we want, and we got to make a map of how you get there. And there has to be a private and a public track to that. Again, we spend a lot of money. We're not real focused collectively as where we want to go with that. And that creates that problem. And so if we want to truly be transformational, that's a partnership. It's about a Black agenda, and it's about knowing what we're asking for and having a roadmap to get there all the time. So we all got to own that. It's about ownership. To me, the two biggest focuses are about education and entrepreneurship. And we got to be serious on that on the government side and fight those fights, but we also got to be serious on the private side so that it's not completely reliant on convincing 49 other people or being in the minority trying to get the majority to do that, because that's a whole lot harder to do than doing it ourselves.
Outstanding. Rep Denson, and I'm gonna keep us, it's 4:09 now. I'm gonna try to get us wrapped up by about 4:15, just so you have a sense of when we're gonna close out. But Rep Denson?
Yeah, I think everybody has said it. What are we doing? I think that it's obvious, it's out there for you to go check and see what we've done. We've all introduced things, we've all tried to push things, but to go back to the beginning and then to connect with Rep Strayhorn said, we've got to have an agenda. So beyond what are we doing, I think the next part that we open up with that is what do we need to be doing to connect with the folks on the ground? What does that agenda look like? So once we've introduced those things, what is that connection to where we need you to be and what we need you to be doing? So if we're up here introducing legislation and doing all this, perhaps we need you making sure those folks are registered. And perhaps we need somebody to make sure that the census is getting filled out. I always say everybody has a lane to be in. And oftentimes we know our people, we all like to play in every part of the lane. And that's when we all start colliding because everybody is not focused on what they're good at. So figure out what you're good at, what groups or organizations are you connected to that does something well, and do that well. But we got to make that connection between everything. And we got to understand that we are one. We, as much as I know our African-American females and sometimes males, because we're doing it on this call, get guilty of, is the women's led on this and the men's, well, guess what? At the end of the night, white people don't take a deep breath talking about black men and black women. They say black people. So we've got to figure out how we do more of this together. And, for a quick example of that, when we talk about maternal health, I always look around the table and see who's there. And when I don't see a black man there, but we're talking about something that disproportionately affects a lot of African-American women, I say, well, who got her pregnant? So if we're not being very conscious about how we're dealing with all of those things, don't expect to get some different kind of result out of there. We're fighting the same thing we were fighting back in the 60s, and here we are today. What's the opportunity to put the glue back together and just do it?
Hey, Rep Denson, I gotta say, man, I underestimated you, man. I underestimated you. You keeping it real for real. Hey, I'm with you on that, man. I'm with you. Senator Craig, were you trying to chime in on something?
Well, and I really appreciate what he said. I've been serving on the Infant Mortality Commission for a number of years because those issues are so tangential. I have daughters, I have 4 children and a number of grandchildren. And so they're not mutually exclusive. If their issues affect Black people, I'm going to be there. Whether it's issues around veterans or issues around women's issues, clearly should be at the table. And because they're difficult issues, and we ought to be there as African-American men. And he just said it, to make sure that our children, I've been a single parent, raising my son. My son was a single parent raising his son. He should be at the table and was at the table. And so those issues are really serious. And what we want to do is get to the end where all of our children and families are whole and have quality of life. And I want to be at each of those tables.
Yeah, let me just give a quick shout out to Sherbrooke Sullivan. She just texted me and said, you giving all these shout outs. I've been watching this show. This is a great forum, but you ain't even acknowledged me watching, so Sherbrooke Sullivan, the county treasurer, thanks so much for tuning in. She's been on every week. And at some point, we're going to have you on and talk money. But I think Senator Thomas was going to say something. And it looked like Representative Robinson wanted to say something.
Yeah, well, obviously, I'm saying to everybody, please fill out your census form. If you haven't filled it out, please get it in. It has a profound impact on your quality of life. But I wanted to say that I'm a strong proponent of referendums, simply because you try to put common sense legislation forward, criminal justice reform legislation, whatever it might be, and you get nowhere because of the makeup of your Senate and your House. It was so interesting when we started talking about gerrymandering, and the Republicans were extremely stubborn on that. Oh no, we're gonna do it this way. Da, 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 da. Well, once they came to the realization that the referendum was going to possibly end up on the ballot, then they wanted to sit down and talk. So I'm saying to everybody out there, let's not wait for them to drag stuff out to where we get nowhere. Your voice through a referendum is what get things done. criminal justice reform. It's going to take a referendum to end this mass incarceration and all of those kinds of things. Gun legislation, common sense. We got a referendum being going forward now. I guarantee you, once the realization of common sense gun legislation question through a referendum becomes a reality, once that gets there, I guarantee you they're going to want to sit down and talk. Just my thoughts.
And I'll just add, Senator Thomas, there was an incident that happened last week in the Capitol where I bet they really willing to sit down and talk the other side. Now, I think there's a lot of cooperational spirit that will be happening over the next several months. So let's just say, keep it at that. I want to give a shout out to Gene Harris, former superintendent for Columbus City Schools. Thanks so much for joining. Floyd Meadows and Archie Williamson, thanks so much for tuning in today. Representative Robinson, I know you had something to say on this. Tell us, I mean, the census, especially for a district like yours, tell us about the value and importance of the district, and you can, you know, as everyone else has, to add in all the other things you want to say in that and connect it to that.
And I'll do it all in under 2 minutes. On the census, it's critically important. There are just a couple examples. One, the Plain Dealer about 2 weeks ago, they showed a couple maps that Republicans are already circulating of what it would look like when they redraw the lines. And one of the controversies is—
Hey, can I get my hands on one of the maps? I need to see that. I need to see that.
And they were talking about potentially one of the seats held by an African-American could be in jeopardy as they're trying to figure out how to draw maps and reduce another Democrat. So it's important. Two, the census, and you can both fill it in mail, you can do it online. The reason the census is also critical is neighborhoods and suburbs are shifting and changing. And it not only captures what's happening in communities, it helps us as political parties figure out where to be target, but also the state starts determining where you're going to draw your lines, where resources are going to go. My district alone, there's several areas, even affluent areas, you see a larger growing immigrant population and African Americans growing there. That changed the landscape of that community in a way that wasn't there before. Or other individuals who maybe have come from other communities closer to the city center who are now living out in the suburbs or exurbs. So it plays a big role, it shifts things, and it's all about resource allocation and where the dollars go. And so if you haven't done the census, please do it. If you have someone in your family hasn't done it, please virtually or social distancing, show them how to do it. You need to get as many of those in as possible. Two, I want to thank Ms. Campbell for the question. I agree with a lot with what the panel has said. The one thing, though, I will say COVID-19 has underscored is just the ability now, and you're doing it with this Zoom forum, Commissioner Boyce, is that we got to continue to figure out ways to get information out to the voters, because everyone's doing fantastic things. We have people on this call who've got not only a passing or getting legislation drafted, but getting things signed into law in a super minority in both chambers. But we just got to keep finding ways to let people know. I just want to underscore it's not mutually exclusive. It's and, not or. We have to work both inside, but we also need an outside game. As you think in sports, inside, outside. So we want to make sure we're not dividing each other up. And then lastly, I want to point out the Ohio Legislative Black Caucus, the oldest in the country. And it's from the state legislative perspective here. It's chaired by Representative Stephanie House now, but that is also a venue that you can go to, a body that you can work with in order to advocate and get things done. And lastly, the last two minority leaders in the state house have been African American. And so there's a lot going on. There are a lot of people representing you. There's a lot of people pushing for change. And if we work together, that inside-outside game, I'm optimistic that we can make some change happen moving forward.
Man, I'm glad you said it the way you did too. I almost feel like ending on that note because it was such an important illustration of the progress that we've made and yet the distance that we've got to go. The one thing I'll say is that oftentimes I see a disconnect with the complexity of what's happening in the legislature or at the county commission and what transfers into everyday impact to people's homes and their lives. House Bill 6 is an example of that. That's a complex, it's been in the news with regards to Speaker Householder and all of that controversy and corruption. Yet it's a complicated bill. But at the heart of it, what means the most is your utility bill, your electric bill is going to go up or go down or however you want to look at it. And so when you say that to people tend to connect and say, you mean to tell me I'm paying, through my taxes, $1.3 billion to this, and I got to pay more, or I got to pay this, whatever. So I think it's also incumbent upon us as elected leaders to help articulate the details of very complex things in a way that people understand how it transfers in their lives. And that to me is what is at the heart of the census, is that at the end of the day, it's really about being counted in everything we do, particularly in the COVID-19 environment. Every decision that we have made as a county government of over 1.4 million people that we represent has been based on data and information. We had a pop-up site in the eastern portion of the county yesterday. That's based on the data that we have that's generated from census data. So we picked it. We've got the National Guard comes in and helps us with it, and they set it up. But it was based on where the trends were, where minority population growth was. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And so census data means everything. So if you're watching or listening, and you haven't done your census form, you can go to 2020census.gov. That's 2020census.gov. It's less than 10 questions, take you less than 10 minutes to do it, but it has a meaningful impact. If you don't have the ability to do it online, you can also go to 844-330-2020. That's 844-330-2020 and fill out your census. And so, the best way to keep people accountable, hold us all accountable, is to be a part of the process. And you can do it very simply and easily by doing your census form and voting. And so I'm going to close this out, give you all just 10 seconds to close out on thoughts and perspectives that you want to leave with Central Ohio. I know we've got Cincinnati, Northeast Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, Columbus represented, Canton and Northeast Ohio. I mean, what's the 10 or 15 seconds worth of what you want to say, close out to the state of Ohio, the folks listening in Central Ohio? We got people from Zanesville watching. Who wants to start off?
I'll go first.
Okay, yep, go.
All right. If you think the majority of the Republicans are going to allow Black Lives Matter and that movement and what it stands for to move forward without a fight, you've been smoking something, and I'd like to have some of it. The bottom line is,
hey, you can't be online saying you want to have some of it too, though. You was cool when you said you
Let you have a
then you said I want some, Now you gonna be the one getting some Instagram notes. They gonna be like, I got something. They gonna tell you exactly where to go.
And I just say, look, we got a movement going now. We got to stick together on it. We have a chance to turn this entire nation around, including Ohio. And but it's not going to happen without a struggle.
Yep. Thank you. Rep. West.
Yeah, I would just probably end like this. In less than 100 days, we will go to the voting poll. And we need each and every person to get out there and vote. Voting is going to change a lot of races, bring more people to the State House, bring more people to your local area, hold people accountable. You also got to know them. So reach out to and get your people elected, but you can only do that by getting out the vote.
Thank you. Who wants to go? Senator Craig. Let's go with Senator.
Let me thank, as I take this, just 2 seconds to thank Commissioner Boyce. This has been a great time to be with colleagues. I would just say this, John Lewis said, good trouble. And all I'm asking you, let's connect together. We're in a seminal time in our history. We can get this done together. We got a presidential election. Everybody, there is no excuses. We've got to vote. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Representative Strayhorn.
First, I want to thank you, Kevin, for putting this together, Commissioner. We need to do more of this, whether it's in private or in public, that we as Black folks got to get together, and there has to be ownership of our own salvation. Nobody's going to care more about your stuff than you do. And we got to own that, and we got to have an agenda, and we got to prosecute that. We have got to work together. And so opportunities to get together and talk about these things and plan are huge. Political participation doesn't start and stop on election day. If you vote for somebody and they don't do what you want, or they're really bad at it, you shouldn't walk away from the process. You should get more involved in the process until this thing starts to look like what you believe it should look like. So I just want to encourage people to stay involved in politics. It's about what your community looks like, and either you're going to be part of making a decision what that looks like, or somebody else is. But that decision is going to happen.
Thank you. Rep. Denson.
Well, thanks for having us on. I would just say there's a role for all of us to play. Figure out your lane, stick to it, and let's get the work done. There is a movement going on. Don't be guilty of not moving in the movement. It's easy to get on social media and say a lot, but at the end of the day, the question is, what have you done? And there's something for all of us to do. So figure out what's comfortable for you, stay involved, get involved. We got to do it together. And hopefully I'll see you all out on the battlefield.
All right, bring us home, Rep. Robinson. Come on.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Boyce. I want to thank my colleagues as well. It's been a great conversation. The next chapter in this story will be written on November 3rd. So as my colleagues mentioned, so it's time to get the census done. It's time to vote. And I'll just end it this way. We need to keep our eye on the prize. Let's not let's keep our eye on the prize.
Man, outstanding, guys. I mean, it warms my heart to know that all across Ohio, we're represented by such strong intellectual resources, such passionate leadership, and experience that's across this board is just really amazing. But I got to tell you, I got the women coming on next week, and you know, I don't know, it's going to be a tough. It's always tough to match them. I mean, because they're strong, and it's going to be exciting to hear from some of the folks y'all mentioned, like Stephanie House, who's the president of the Black Caucus, and Amelia Sykes, the minority leader, and Erica Crawley, our own state representative here. They're going to bring it, and I think it'll be as fruitful as the conversation has been today. I'm so grateful for those of you who took time out of your schedule to join us and listen and write in. I look forward, as always, to your Instagram DMs, your Facebook messages, and even some of the letters that I get. I'm so grateful that you're paying attention and, more importantly, being engaged. Let me end on just reminding you that we still have time to get those census forms in, and you can easily complete your less than 10 question, less than 10-minute census questionnaire by going to 2020census.gov. That's 2020census.gov, or you can call 844-330-2020. That's 844-330-2020. Your voice is your vote is your voice, and we're just asking you to exercise it in this process. I'm so grateful that you took time to join me. Join me next week, same time, same place, and I think the conversation is going to be pretty good. So thanks for joining us today. Thank you, gentlemen, for your insight, wisdom, and support. I'll see you on the battlefield.
Thanks, Gavin. Really
Thanks,
appreciate it.
guys. Yeah.